So I have clean water. I have scrubbed off my plate, so everything's nice and clean. So now I'm going to go ahead and create some oranges. It's my blue, or I'm sorry, my yellow and my red. And look at how the yellow pushed that red away. So I'm just going to lightly mix them together. A little bit more red. Just a little bit thicker yellow. So now, ooh, you know what? Maybe actually more yellow. Let's get some yellow right there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my number 6 brush this time, and I'm going to go over the whole flower with some water. And actually, you could even just drop in a little bit of yellow so you can see where you're going. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go between grabbing some water and grabbing some color. I should have been a little bit more careful around the edge of those leaves. I'll just have to stay away from that area for a while. I just grabbed more water and a little bit more yellow. And I'm always kind of keeping in mind too what I'm seeing in the image. And if you look at the image, right down as it gets towards this bottom part, it's almost white. Actually, it is white on some of these tips. So I'm trying to very carefully go around those areas. All right, now I'm going to switch back to my number 2. And I'm going to pick up some deeper yellow, and right in areas that I see are going to be very dark valued areas, I'm going to put it on pretty thick. Okay, now I'm going to come over. I'm going to pick up some of that yellow-orange. I'm going to start dropping those colors in. I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of water. I'm actually going to zoom in just a little bit more so you can really see what I'm doing. You can still see my orange and yellow, the area I'm going to be grabbing from. Now, when you're first putting down these oranges, they may look a little dull, but all colors kind of look that way when they're very watery. We are definitely going to build up some of that saturation. I noticed a little area up there that I didn't have water on. Honestly, I think it's better to start slow, build in layers, and then you don't feel overwhelmed. Actually, a lot more yellow. And while you're looking at this and you're putting color in there, as you look around, you can see that some areas are very reddish orange. Some areas are a deep red orange. Some areas are almost bluish. And those areas come from the fact that it's in the shadow and it's reflecting up from all the greenery that's around it. I'm going to get a little bit more yellow. One of the reasons why I don't want to go too heavy with the orange is because we are going to be making those beautiful lines. And those lines are going to add a little bit more of a value change. So I don't want to go too heavy on this first layer. I just want to kind of start building a little bit of form. And actually now when I look at this area, I'm going to go with just a little bit of the red, very, very watery. Now you can see that the paper is really starting to swell a little bit. So what I'm probably going to do, stop here. And dry it, and then we're going to go and do another layer. Okay, so everything's really dry. So now that I've got some basic color areas in there, you can see I have varying yellows, and I have areas that are oranger, areas that are redder. Let's go ahead now, and we're going to address this petal by petal. So I'm going to start on this petal right here. little bit more yellow. And we'll see where this goes. Now this is on dry paper. One of the reasons why I'm starting with this darker petal is because I want to establish the darkest areas so that I can judge how my light areas are going to look. I'm adding a little bit of water. Actually, I'm going to come over here to some of that red. I'm going to drop that in. Now I'm going to drop in a little bit more yellow. Picking up a little bit of that orange right there. I'm trying to be very careful as I go right up to that edge of that petal that's in the front, because that petal right along there has got a beautiful little light area. And that's going to be important. And you know, I've talked about this a lot, your value. Making sure that you have lots of lights and lots of darks. That's what's going to make your eye go to the painting. Isn't that amazing how this very pink red is just making gorgeous, beautiful oranges? I'm not going heavy on the water. You can see I'm just picking up color, and I can see that this petal actually goes all the way down to the base. Now that's kind of hard to see when you're tracing out your image, and that's why I think it's better if you draw it yourself instead of using my drawing. Because then you can see where I've missed stuff. Now see how I'm just kind of grabbing some of those colors, I'm pulling them down. And now that my colors are kind of drying, this is also a good reason why you want to have a nice clean plate. You want to have something that's white. Most watercolor palettes tend to yellow over time. And then if you're constantly getting color out of the palette, it's kind of hard to see exactly how much color, how much water was in that. It's really hard to tell. I'm gonna blot my brush. I'm just picking up a little bit of color here and there. My paper's still damp. It's going to blend out a little bit, but not a whole lot, because that's what I want. I want to have all these little crinkly folds in there. And then right down, it gets really dark down there as it's heading towards the base of the flower. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that like that. We'll let all that kind of spread out. We'll let it dry and we'll sink in. And now let's skip. So let's skip this area and let's go ahead and work on this little interesting fold right here. Now there's a lot of blue in that area. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab some blue and I'm going to put it over here so that you can see me. And very, very lightly. It's very, very watery. Your blue is very strong. One of the reasons why I'm putting this on now is because I want it to really sink into that paper. Because this leaf is just a little dull. This is very vibrant orange. And then we've got some vibrant reds. And then all of a sudden, you can see this edge of this leaf, or I'm sorry, a petal, is turned down towards where all of the green is. So there's a little bit of a tinge of blue in there. So that's what I'm doing. Just adding a little bit. I'm adding a little bit of that blue, and that's going to really help dull that color down. Make sure when you do this, see how watery that is? That blue is very overpowering. You have to be very careful when you're using it. So what I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to dry it, but no, I think I can go ahead and get this petal over here. So let's do the same thing there. Very, very watery, watery, watery. And I'm just going to do the same thing on this petal. Why? Because it's the same thing. If you look at it, it is very, very unsaturated. It's in shadow, but there's a lot of blue in it. So it's a very cool leaf. Petal, not leaf. Isn't that interesting how it's already changing everything about this flower? A little bit more. I'm trying to keep it away from my yellow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop, and I'm going to get this dried, and then we will go ahead and finish those, or not finish, but we're going to go ahead and start working on those other petals. Everything's dry. And you can really see the difference that adding that blue in, you can see that when we get those darker colors on there, that is really going to change the whole look of those petals that are kind of laying at an angle. So I think while I have that blue out there, let me go to a small brush. Let me go to my 0. And I'm going to do the same thing right along the base of this flower. A nice watery mixture. You can see some other areas where it's going to be really dark. And right along the base of this flower. Okay, I think I can go ahead and start putting in some of these oranges. Let's go ahead and work on this leaf. Let's go ahead and work on that petal up there. And it's on dry paper again. One of the reasons why I want to go right into painting wet on dry and just kind of blend things out is because all of those folds in that petal, they're sharp. They're sharp folds. And I think it's because poppy petals are so thin that they just, it's almost like a very thin tissue paper. So I'm really glad I put in all those little lines so I knew where some of those folds were. And I'm just going over them again. And in little areas where I see lines, I'm going ahead and just adding those also. In fact, now I can kind of come along on this poppy and just add in some areas where I might have missed. Actually, I think on this one too, I'm going to have to pull out some highlights. Going a little bit darker. I'm adding water, just kind of make sure everything's blending out well. And of course that's going to dry, and I'm going to be able to come back and see exactly where I need to add more color. So let's go over now to this guy, and I'm going to not only use my 0, but I'm going to use my number 2. And it's just dry again. Just going to switch between water and color. Might scoot this over a little bit so you can see where I'm getting color from. And if you miss any highlights, like I do, and you'll know this from my other videos, I will go back and with a tiny scrubber brush, we'll scrub out some of those highlights. That's what scrubber brushes are for. And see how, because we have most of the sizing on the paper has been kind of washed off, it's a lot easier to soften an edge. actually going to switch to just red. It's a little bit redder towards this side. Just kind of dropping that color in. And again, just light values. Don't overdo it. Trying to keep a little tiny white line right along the edge of that petal. It comes up into there, but if I can't, again, when we get our Dremel tool out, we're going to fix that. You may notice that as I add more water and I paint, that some of the imprinting when the paper was made is coming through, but that will fade. That'll disappear. Again with my smaller brush, and I'm picking up in areas on my palette where the color has gotten a little bit drier. And again, if I miss any of those lines, I will go back and pick them out with a scrubber brush. See how I'm just gently stroking the color in? I'm not trying to completely fill it in because I want light spots and I want dark spots. And then we'll keep building color and value with another layer. So I think I'm going to go ahead and work on this petal right here. I'm going back to my number 2. Switching back and forth between more of a yellow orange and then more of a red orange. Being very careful about the edge of that front petal. I actually need a lot more yellow. Sometimes you don't see colors right away until you really start adding in thicker and thicker colors. Now I'm adding some water, so as I get down to the tip of this petal, it's a little bit lighter. Now let's go ahead and try some more of that orangish red. I'm going to go back to my 0. Now I'm just going to try to establish some of those lines that are going right through. Doing it while the paper is still damp helps the lines kind of spread out a little bit so they don't look like they're just drawn on with a pencil. I'm going to wick my brush a little bit. Actually, I'm going to go with my 2-aught and I'm going to turn this petal just a little bit. And put in those lines. This was a little too dry. I'm going to stop and I'm going to, let's zoom out and let's get this completely dried so that I can now start moving around to these other petals without my hand hitting right on the surface. So probably should have started over there, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop and get it dried and then we'll continue on. Okay, everything's nice and dry and I'm going to start working back over in this area. Some of my washes are a little bit dry, but that's okay. That just kind of concentrates the color a little bit. And as I keep adding water, it'll thin out. But sometimes I kind of like it that way. I'm still doing wet on dry. Again, I am picking out the areas with the darkest values and softening with water. Oh, let me zoom out just a bit. Zoom back in. Sorry for that. I'm going to grab a little bit more red. Trying to be careful to paint around the green. Actually, I'm going to go with a 0. I accidentally kind of came over into this petal, but you won't ever see that. Now I'm going to soften. And pick up some more red. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and just drop a lot of red down into that bottom area. It's pretty dark and I don't feel like I'm getting enough red. But you know what? If it takes you a couple of layers, you know, here's the thing. You're better off just keep adding layers. It's a lot easier to add color than it is to take away. And even though I do use my my scrubber brushes, sometimes it's just much easier to just go around things than to have to worry about cleaning up edges, pulling out highlights. So take your time. It's not a race. You know, I look back on when I first started painting, and I can remember just being so darn scared about painting. And I had to keep telling myself, stop being scared. It's paper. You can flip it over, and yeah, paper is expensive. It's a lot more expensive now. But you know, the thing is, I kind of kept it in perspective. Okay, I'm picking up some yellow. You know, I would think about how many times I'd go out and go get a coffee. And, you know, you'd add that up at the end of the month. And I thought, well, you know, if you can spend $50 a month on coffee, why am I freaking out about paper? So that's just a good way to keep it into perspective. You think about all the things that you do that bring you joy. And painting, you know, it's for a lot of people, it's therapy, it's relaxing. So enjoy it. Don't worry so much about if you get something perfect. Just keep at it. And it'll keep getting easier and easier as you paint. Okay, I'm gonna leave that little area alone, and I'm gonna come back down to here. And this time, I'm going to go with my number 2. Adding some yellow back over in this area. Actually, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and grab some clean yellow. Aha! See what a difference that's making? Now I'm going to pick up just some water, some clean water, and blend it out into that bottom area, which is a lot lighter. Now I'm going to go back and pick up more yellow. Now over and picking up some of that orange. See, I'm just lightly dropping it in there. And it'll all start smoothing out. Just getting some water, letting everything blend out a little bit. I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but I've noticed that this paper, it's got an imprint of where it was sitting on the screen, but as it fades and it blends back in, that disappears. So every once in a while you'll get a weird piece of paper, and well, this is kind of one of them. But again, that will disappear. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back up to this leaf and add some more yellow. And see how as I'm going right over the top, none of those colors are lifting. They're staying exactly where I put them. So now you can see the layer behind it. So now I'm basically upping the saturation. Let me make a little dam there with some dry area of the plate so I don't pick up any of that blue. Some more yellow. And I'm going to come over here and add more yellow here. And it's okay that it goes over onto the next petal because my other color is staying. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and add some yellow right into this petal right here. I'm going to add a little bit of the red and orange and just let it kind of flow down. We've already established that first layer, so it's not like I'm going to lose that edge. And drop some red in there. Now I can go over here. Lots of water. There's a lot of red in this petal. I'm going to pick up some yellow. And I know I've gone over those little beautiful white areas, but I'm just going to scrub those out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and then we'll come back and start deepening some of those values like we did up on that leaf. Yep. One more little spot I see. There we go. I'm switching over to, actually instead of my 0, I'm going to go with my 2-aught brush. And let's get some of that color a little bit thicker right there. So let me go back to my number 2. Let's really get some yellows and reds in there. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see. So I have a nice thick consistency of the yellow and the red. Actually putting a little bit more over there. And then let's move up. Let's move a little bit of the blue over there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in again. Oh, whoops. Got some on the lower part there. I'll have to clean that up in a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I'm all ready. I'm going to go ahead and go into this area, and I'm just going to use my yellow orange that I have right here. In fact, let's turn it a little bit so you can see me grabbing some of that. So I'm using a lot more yellow in that mixture right now instead of the red. And now maybe just some yellow. Now, if you feel like that first layer is too light, don't worry about it. Just keep going. And then when this dries, we'll come back to it and we'll add a little bit more yellow. And we'll get it to blend together with those top layers. You know, I am actually looking at that, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add, I'm just going to add a little bit of red right over the top of everything. I just don't feel like it's quite red enough. Now that's much better. Now what I can actually do, I feel like I have that saturation correct, because when I was working over in this area, it just seemed to blend in a little bit too far. And remember, I'm always talking about making sure that you have plenty of value change. So now what I've done is I've come in there and added a little bit of that blue, and now I'm going to follow that up with a little bit of that red. And it just darkened it just a hair. Now let's do that right down in this area. And remember, you just a tiny, tiny bit. You don't need a whole lot. And look at how that really changed. I changed that whole petal. Instead of it being flat, it now looks like it has crevices in those folds. And a little bit more red. Oh, and right down, let's make sure I don't get too much. Right down by the leaf. Now I'm going to follow on the top of that the little bit of the red. little tiny bit more blue. Ooh, now that's really developed into nice deep colors. Okay, so let's go back. This time I think I'm going to go to a 0. And let's get some more, orange in here. The interesting thing about oranges and reds is, you know, it's kind of a dark value. So you're not going to see a lot of white highlights. So that means what we have to do is we have to go back and we have to darken some of the red areas to really make those lighter areas stand out. Okay, let's drop in a little bit more color here and there. Okay, let's see. Let's skip over to this petal now. And now what I'm going to do, because I feel like my values are pretty strong, so I'm just going to kind of follow along those little ridges. Just putting in some of those interesting little lines that we're seeing. And now I'm going to come over into that red, and I'm going to just make some of these areas a little bit redder. Now I'm going to go with my number 2 again. No, my number 5, my 5-aught. Because what I need to do, I'm actually pulling over some of the blue and some of the red. And actually a little bit more red. And now some of the yellow. See now how I have kind of a very dusky looking burnt sienna. So this is how I'm going to go ahead and get some of those lines in there. Actually, let's add a little bit more red. Oh no. Okay, let's see, more red. Hopefully that'll lighten up a little bit. I felt like that was a little too dark of a line. Let's get some more yellow in there. Just adding some dark behind those leaves. And let's see. I'm just lightly scratching in some lines there. Okay, now I'm just going to keep going around and adding in some more details. I think I might have gone a little dark right there. There we go. Let's I'll come in here, go back over here up to this petal. Just drop in a few of those lines. Now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my number 2, and I'm going to grab some of that orange. I'm going to go right over the top. Now you can see everything that's under it. Let's put some more orange over on this petal. Let's really get that saturation in there. And then we'll go back and pull out some highlights. I'm going to back up a little bit. And again, it's going to look a little strange until it dries. But once we get those highlights in there, it's going to look beautiful. And while I'm doing that, I think I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing onto this petal right here. I'm not worried about anything I did underneath lifting up. This is going to work out really well. Those colors are staining the paper, and you can still see them from underneath. Let's add yellow. And I'm going right into those other petals. But I built up enough value that you can see the different petals. While we're here, let's go ahead and we'll let that dry. And now let's do the same thing over here. I added just a little bit of water to start me off. See now how that saturation is completely building up. Now some water. And then as all these dry, then the colors are going to smooth out nicely. You know, I still need to get, that still needs a little bit more orange. Let's go ahead and drop some of that in there. Isn't that awesome? You can see all of my little details underneath of that. And then of course we'll have to pick those out a little bit more, add some darks in those areas. And let's go ahead and same thing with this area. I'm not worried about the colors moving into the other petals because we've already got those, we already have the lines established, so everything's going to stay where we put it. I'm just putting a little bit more red down in this area. One of the reasons why is because there's not much value in red. It's such a dark color that I want to make sure that we get plenty of color change going on. Okay, it's getting darker and it's starting to really, the colors are really starting to come out now. Oh, look at that. That's going to look really good. Okay, I'm going to stop and dry it and we're going to add another layer.